G'day, welcome to Say It With Guitars. I'm your host, Pete Cornelius. Each episode I'll be digging deep and getting to hang with some of Australia's finest guitar pickers, songwriters, producers, collectors and makers. I look forward to bringing you these fun conversations and I hope you enjoy Say It With Guitars.
Hey there legends, thanks again for joining us for the last episode of Season 3. What a wild ride it's been. I've learnt so much. There's been some great conversations with some absolute champions of the music industry. And today's guest is no exception. He's a great producer, drummer, multi-instrumentalist. Yeah, he plays everything. Mr. Syd Green, legend, and loves to get in deep with all things music and life in general. Hope you've all had a great break over the Christmas, New Year period. Managed to go catch some live music or expand your music collection by buying a record or two. This is my last episode for a little while. I'm going to take a little break and probably come back in the colder months of the winter here. I'll be releasing my record soon too, folks, so maybe keep an eye on that if you can. If you want to come and see a gig or order yourself a copy or just check it out online when it arrives, that'd be a wonderful thing. It features a bunch of Tasmanian musicians, and Matt Fell himself is a very recent addition to Tassie, so it's great to be working with him over the last year or so. Anyway, it's been great to have you for the season, and we'll see you for the next series.
Before we crack into today's show, I'd like to shout out to our Season 3 sponsors, Tarrant Guitars and Top Shelf Guitars. The custom workshop of award-winning luthier Billy Tarrant on the northwest coast of Tasmania uses locally and internationally sourced solid tone woods to create a wide range of custom guitars, including acoustic, electric, lap steel guitars and specialty instruments, showcasing his passion for superior tone and structural integrity. Tassie's one-stop custom workshop for custom-made guitars, all guitar repairs and services. Visit tarrantguitars.net.au. Top Shelf Instruments specialise in used and vintage guitars, pedals and amps, shipping worldwide from Hobart, Tasmania. They love helping players land exceptional instruments for manageable dollars, and guitars from Japan hold a special place in their hearts. New old guitars hit the website almost daily, so head on over to the website for this week's weird and wonderful offerings, topshelfinstruments.com.au. All right, on with the conversation. Let's dig in. All right, I'd like to welcome to the conversation today on Say It With Guitars podcast, Mr. Syd Green. Syd, how you doing?
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me, mate.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. Thanks
this
for jumping on board.
Podcast will be now called Say It With Drums. You just don't realise that we're actually changing the name.
Well, drums are taking over the world, mate. So, yeah, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's where it all started, isn't it, with drums? You know, like if you think about music in terms of one of the original ways to make noise.
Totally. I think the oldest drum was actually a human body. They used to hold them up and beat them. True story.
Right. So not your own body, it's someone else's body.
No, not me.
Oh, right.
Not me.
Well, let's not go hitting people just yet.
So that's fair.
What have you been hitting, Syd? What have you been up to, man? I saw a photo you sent me during the week of a nice little remote session.
Oh, man.
Do you do a bit of that?
What an amazing... Yeah, I do a bit of that recording. I think when it comes to making records these days, distraction is probably the biggest thing we need to get away from, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea of getting away, the idea of no mobile phone reception, the idea of being completely immersed in the music and the art that you're creating is probably even more appealing than ever, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the Stiff Gins, who I've been working with a little bit over the last 12 years or so, and I met them many moons ago. But got to make a beautiful record with them with the Australian Museum. It was called The Spirit of Things, and it was the Australian Museum have these Indigenous artefacts in vaults in the basement of the museum in Sydney.
In Sydney, right.
And and we were really fortunate enough to be able to access that vault and go through some incredible artefacts.
Wow.
And amazing. So, the project was, do objects hold energy? And if they do, if they do, let's write about it and document it. So, we'd go through these shelves of artifacts from boomerangs to clubbing sticks to pieces of crystal, and you could grab it out, you could feel it. You could then go to a computer, type in the catalogue, and then it would tell you where it was from, who made it, how it was collected.
Yep. So each
and
item
from
has a
there we
backstory
would,
from their catalogue point of view, and
yeah.
Wow.
So that way we were inspired by those stories, and in turn wrote songs.
Uh-huh.
And that was our first project with the Stiff Gins, and so from there we've had a great relationship. We did some gigs, we did some theatre shows, and they just were successful on this a new grant, and which meant they could go and make a record in a magical house in the middle of nowhere. So that's where I've been for the last 2 weeks.
Magic. Totally immersed in the thick of it.
It's quite a state you get to where I can't tell you how valuable the flow of that, just having momentum, and you can get quite a lot done. Be very clear about executing ideas and what will work and what won't work, and so pretty magical time.
Yeah, like you said, it's a real flow state. Like to be totally immersed in that. You like in a typical scenario, people are, they're working 9 to 5 or whatever, and then they clock off and they go, I might go and do some tracking after dinner, or put the kids to bed and I'll go and do a vocal part or a guitar part, and that's it's just the tip of the iceberg. You're not even really cracking into that flow creative state. Like you just sort of, it's a real hard way to actually get motivated. Whereas if you can lock yourself in a remote location where no one has any commitments to or any connection to, like you've maybe just rented like a nice looking Airbnb for a week or two, like no one
that's
has
exactly what it was.
Yeah. Like it's no one's obligation to make sure that the floor doesn't get scratched or the kitchen keeps clean or whatever. It's just like you just run a mark and just totally immerse yourself. That's such an idealistic way to do it these days. And were you guys writing in the same time frame, or was writing at an earlier stage and then you just came in with ideas? And
Yeah, I think the ladies ended up doing some writing sessions before the records, so they had skeletons of songs, all done, so well prepared in that sort of context where they had some really loose chord charts, and pretty much skeletons of songs ready to go.
Great.
And then a day would look like we'd all get up, have breakfast together. We'd talk about the song. We'd reference some demos. We'd reference some songs that they like and how they'd like to sound. and then it was basically someone on an acoustic guitar, and we'd basically just shift through the arrangement, made sure it would feel good in the context of what we were going to put it in, whether it be drums, piano, or and then therefore it would start shape shifting into something.
Yep.
As we were feeding it, you know.
I think it's important too to have those references. It's nice to let the song just totally be what it is, which is. But I think having a reference is a great point too, to sort of help bring people together into the same sort of angle, you know, because it'd be quite easy to put 4 or 5 people in a room and they all kind of bring in their own input and their own ideas, and often that doesn't really it works if you've got the right people, but sometimes you need to sort of have that little, you know, here's an idea, here's a reference, let's all channel that, and then they can all bring that.
Yeah. Isn't that so true?
Whether that
Almost
changes
like
their aspect or not, it might just mean that they change the sound of their instrument, or maybe you play with mallets instead of sticks or rods, or just little things like that. Yeah,
it's like a goalpost in a way. Everyone's kicking for the same goal.
Yeah,
and that's really great, because we had a session guitar player in on that recording session.
Uh-huh.
I met this young guy from the Southern Highlands called Ben Malone, and he's just wonderful to work with. He's young, hungry, hungry to play music, and
great.
It's great. It reminds me of, you know, when I was 21.
Yeah.
Or however old he is. He's pretty young, but he's great, and he's yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, man. So that's what I've been up to, amongst other things. But that one's the most recent.
Was this project the Artifact project, or is that the one you're talking about like 12 years ago? One you mentioned when you went to the city?
The Spirit of Things was our first album that I did with the Stiff Chins. That started the recording relationship.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, man.
Yeah, man. It's a beautiful record too, actually. Really great.
So in that process, in that sort of 2 weeks you mentioned, you guys are pretty much done? Like, is it all in the bag? You just got to mix it and master it and get it out there sort of thing? Or you got a bit more work to do?
There's a tiny little bit more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And just some overdubs and a couple of things that, you know, obviously with hindsight, that they'd like to redo. You know, in particularly if a song went in a direction that someone wasn't ready for. It's one of those things where that session is almost a workshopping more so than the actual the final outcome.
Yep.
So, I think we're doing some vocal overdubs and some mandolin and a couple of things. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And how do you go, like, each room has its sound. Like, you go into every environment has its own sort of tonal character and resonance and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. When you're doing overdubs and trying to fit in, you know, to an existing project, do you have, like, for instance, I've just recorded drums at my neighbour's. He's got this sort of old wood gallery studio space that's empty. It's like this sort of grey, massive space. It's sick. He's like, yeah, just come and use it. So I've been recording drums in there recently. Yeah, it's great.
Unreal.
But I'm not going to drag my whole studio up and relocate. So I've just sort of, I've taken my live mixer and just done like a USB, you know, no fancy preamps, just sort of capture all the sounds. Anyway, what I did was I captured I did an impulse response of the room. So, you know, I did a sine wave or a sweep, recorded that, and then I think you put it into your IR reader and that turns it into a reverb somehow. Yeah, anyway, I did that. So now I've got that space as a reverb in my door.
Cool.
So I'm going to apply that to guitars and vocals and things like that also go onto the project. So it sounds like they're all in the room with the drums, I suppose. That's kind of the reason for doing that. So I think that's a bit of a long way to go around the question. But how do you go in terms of trying to fit things, like, you know, if you're recording in a dry room, how, like, is that going to fit with the project you've already done?
That's really interesting, Pete. First of all, we're definitely changing this podcast to this is an interview with Pete Cornelius. I want to ask him all about what you just talked about just then. That sounds amazing. Hey, you're totally right. I guess in a way I was treating each instrument differently as opposed to all of us in one room recording.
Gotcha.
You know, like a live performance where I think that would be what you just described about trying to create the other overdubs to feel like they're in the same room would be really valid. But in this context, we were doing each instrument separately. So there were a couple of times, you know, we had close mic'd amps. So I guess in that context, it doesn't really matter if something is in a roomy sound or a close mic sound or, you know. In saying that, I think some of the overdubs will purely just be backing vocals.
Sure.
So I'd imagine tonally it would change. Obviously, it'd have to, right?
Yeah. I was just intrigued by because I don't know, like you know the wormhole that YouTube is, how you sort of all of a sudden, you know, you're thinking, oh, let's see what this IR business is, and the next minute I'm reading about capturing, you know, the sound of a room. It's like, this is crazy, and it's all part of, like, it's all inbuilt in your software basically. So it's just it's crazy. It's
pretty wild. You just did remind me of two things that was looking at doing. Was one, I wanted to get rid of the room. It was too roomy.
Sure.
I ended up putting as many thick blankets. I had a few bass traps that I took up.
Yep.
And the other artifact that I've been willing to try is we had a guest piano player come up, Kevin Hunt, who's a renowned jazz pianist from the Con in Sydney. We tried to get a real piano but couldn't do it, so I ended up doing MIDI.
Yep.
And so now I'm in the process of, when I'm mixing, I'm actually sending some speakers into an upright piano and recording the mechanical noises of a piano sustain pedal, you know, for example, or the lifting of the keys, just to create more of a, you know, real sound.
Yeah. That's interesting.
You know?
So you just get like the resonance of the strings and the piano body itself. How would you replicate the keys and and the sustain pedal? Or are you just going to get in there and just use the pedal?
Yeah. I think I'll play it. Obviously I can't play piano like this incredible player on the day, but I can. I'm just going to, you know, basically move the sustain pedal as if I was playing it.
Yep.
And hopefully the strings will resonate. And but really, what I want to capture is the mechanical noises of it anyway. So
yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
To give it the illusion of it being real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love. I've got a little upright piano in my in one of my spaces, and I quite often record drums in there. And it just has this natural ambience that it just gives off. Like, it just resonates. I haven't experimented yet, but I'm going to sometime to either like put a brick on the sustain pedal so the strings are open, or just like get some weights or some clamps on particular keys. Or maybe if I know the song's in the key of D, I'll just go and like clamp all the Ds down.
Yes. How great would that be? Yeah. You know, did you ever go to a studio in Sydney called Linear?
No.
Linear had a EMT plate reverb. I don't know if you've ever stood in the same room as one, but they're quite big. They're,
a huge big flat
6 feet by 8 feet, right?
Yeah.
So the engineer, Chris, he set up the EMT plate reverb against the wall, and then we set up a drum kit in front.
Yes.
And then just printed the reverb that was resonating from the drum kit.
Great.
And essentially the piano is a big sound plate. So
yeah,
it's very similar, except that obviously has those strings resonating. So like you say, you might get
harmonic
dissonance.
Yeah, dissonance.
which could be like add to that texture, right?
Yeah, especially if you tune your drums, I suppose, to those keys as well. Like you could just have it could be a whole lot of fun.
Yeah.
Deep dive.
Yeah. Actually, the third pedal on a grand piano is exactly that. You can hold down stop me if you already know that, but you can hold down a chord on the third piano of a grand piano and it'll only open those sustained notes.
I didn't know that. I always wondered what that extra pedal did. So it sort of like rings out, or like those freeze pedals that electro harmonics make.
Yeah, it's exactly like one of those. So
wow.
yeah, it's quite cool. So then you get that accidental harmonic series happening, obviously based on whatever key you're playing.
Yeah.
John Cage, do you know John Cage, the composer? He did a lot of prepared piano in that context where he had only he would do that a lot, where he'd put paper clips on the only the strings that were open, and it's pretty interesting.
That's really interesting.
Pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
pretty avant-garde.
Oh, yeah, totally. And
clearly
wouldn't even probably make the record. Well, if you're making a contemporary record, that sort of stuff. But that I think is a bonus of having a home studio space where you can actually experiment with that sort of stuff. Like you definitely wouldn't want to go into a high-paying facility and go, all right, I'm just going to put some clips on the piano and
can we mic up the whole Steinway, please? I just need the chord of D. Oh, how great would that be, Pete?
Yeah,
that'd
weeks
be amazing.
Later. Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man.
It's funny.
Yeah. And I'm just sort of spying in at your little space there too. So I know that you've been busy making records out of your little facility.
Yeah, man.
How long you been in there?
My wife Ellie and I bought this place 12 years ago, and it just obviously had a great garage down the side of the house, and we went, yep, that's what we'll do. And fortunate for me, when I left school, I was a carpenter. I was doing an apprenticeship, and I had some building skills. So next thing you know, we lay 1,000 Besser blocks filled with concrete.
Yep.
And build a room within a room, and it's worked. It's working so well.
Yeah, right. So you've just internally created that studio structure inside a existing garage or something, or a basement. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Was that a mixture of experimentation or research, or like how did you go about that? Because I know that you can probably make a room sound worse pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Look, I did as much research as my Google fingers could do.
Yeah.
So I lined the garage with yellow tongue flooring first. I also decoupled the inner room from the outer room.
Cool.
So it's a freestanding room within a room.
Sure.
It also has I think from memory, about a 70 mil air gap.
Mm-hmm.
I also can change the walls inside the room. So it was a Besser block dwelling, but then I changed 2 walls to be 2 were concrete with rendered concrete, so it's not a flat space.
Bit of texture, yep.
For flutter echo. And then I changed one of the walls to a wooden room, and then the other wall to an absorption wall.
Yep.
So I've got a 150 mil of absorption.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and that was based on the elements, wood, stone, air, basically.
Great.
And it really feels like it works. It has enough ambience not to be dead. And then obviously just as you work in a room, you understand its flaws and you make up for those in other ways.
Yep. Did you have to treat it
making
much
reverb
afterwards?
out of pianos?
Yeah, exactly. Like, did you have to make up any, like you said, bass traps and any sort of like clouds hanging off the ceiling?
Yeah.
And
I did do a couple of clouds, but I think they're more aesthetic than actual practical, you know. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but I did make some bass traps, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a big one, especially if you're trying to keep, because if you're in a suburban-ish area or on a flight path or, you know, somewhere like that, you don't want noise getting in or out. Like, I'm pretty lucky where I live. I don't have any issues in that regard. So I'm not actually, my space wasn't that important for me to contain or to keep noise out. I was just more thinking about acoustics inside the space. So I was pretty lucky in that regard. So I didn't have to worry about decoupling and all that sort of rhubarb. But
how great.
Oh, absolutely.
How great.
Totally. But you know, it's close to home, but it's not too. Yeah, the kids can still go to sleep when I'm up there making noise. So, but you're actually inside the house, pretty much, yeah.
No, it's separate from the house.
It's separate. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, it's separate from the house, and the family can hear. Occasionally, they'll hear the thud of the bass drum.
Yeah.
So it's very soundproof. We have neighbours next door, but they don't live there. So I'm very fortunate in that context where I'm hardly disturbing anyone. Yeah. But it's very interesting what you say about, you know, just going back to the house that I was just at. You know, it was far from a studio. I mean, you take all your equipment in there and the microphones, but you're still at the mercy of the environment, the acoustics.
Yep.
And that's when you realise that you're not actually, you are actually recording all of it, the environment, not just the music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the environment becomes the extra member of the band, hey? Like
until the rain shows up and then you go, shit. I didn't sign up for this, you know?
Yeah, note to self.
We were really lucky actually. And obviously note to anyone, I definitely, that's one of the sort of things I talk about with artists when we're entertaining the idea of going to a remote recording that, you know, 1920, for example, we did a similar thing. And when we got there, we realised that the electric fence was emitting...
tick, tick.
Yeah, the old tick. The what's it called? Electromagnetic interference.
Yeah.
And we tried everything to eliminate that. And we did in the end. But, geez, what a pain.
Like through tech, like did you just like isotope it, or did you like actually have to physically get some power conditioners, or like how do you get around electric fence?
Yeah, what we ended up doing was keeping most of the takes, and we just recorded sustained notes for the end of songs when you could actually hear it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's in the take.
It's in there, yeah, right.
It's just inaudible amongst all the noise.
Yeah.
You know, a rock and blues band, you know, running amok. You're not going to hear a tick fence.
No.
Thank God for us, you know, we were lucky.
Yeah, right. So you've been doing that for a while, Syd, the old drag a studio into a house scenario. Do you have a checklist or a process of things you need in going into that environment? Like, do you have like a bag of thick, heavy rugs that you take with you, or like you try and like what's your process?
Well, you know what? What's interesting, and we haven't really gone there yet, but in the 90s, I was doing it with a band that I was in from Melbourne. We were potentially maybe, I wouldn't say one of the first, but we were really trying to get that freedom with creativity. And I remember we recorded one of our last records at Sing Sing in Melbourne,
Yep.
where we just tracked the band, and then the label ended up buying 3 ADAT machines, and we took the rest home to finish over a 3-month period. And that was an ordeal, you know.
Yeah.
Syncing 3 ADAT machines. We had a console. The producer at the time, you know, he had some amazing outboard equipment and tape machines, and by the end of the 3 months, we had this room above a shop in St Kilda completely decked out. I mean, it was just unheard of. So, and then, of course, you know, taking those ADATs back into the studio, syncing it all back to the tape machine, and off we go when we're mixing.
Yep.
And we'd crack the code that it was achievable, you know, and that was in 1995.
Sure. Yep.
And I'm sure bands were doing it before. I mean, Willie Nelson's Stardust was recorded on a bus, so
Yeah.
you know.
Well, you think about like Big Pink, the band, like all the early band recordings are all done in houses. And they didn't have any engineers; they just did it themselves. And all the mastering guys were like, "This is not how you master music. Like, this is not. This is not a finished product." And they're like, "This is what we want.
This is what we want." Well, yeah, exactly. Nebraska, you know, the Springsteen record. I mean, it's a 8-track, one of the first 8-track recorders, right?
Yeah. Or that Chris Whitley Dirt Floor. It's just like one microphone in a house. You know.
Oh,
amazing.
yeah.
You know,
amazing,
stuff like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, and doesn't that go almost further into, are they actually capturing a life? It's not just the music, it's all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
the
soul of the performer.
It's all of it, yeah. It really does blow me away that concept of the freedom that you're not bound by a clock. You're not bound. Obviously, you're bound by financially in some regard, whether it's how much it's costing while you're there or how much you're not making while you're there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So obviously those factors come into play. But if you've, like a holiday, if you've allocated 2 weeks to your art, then you're in the holiday, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So those examples you say are so, man, they're so great because you're hearing something more than the music.
I agree. Absolutely. It's a real snapshot of their time, of their creative interaction between the whole unit, or, you know, it's just it's more than just the instrument capture. It's totally just a whole, I don't know. It's hard to explain. Really
It is, isn't it? And I guess I was thinking about what you were just saying. You know, there was a couple of times there where I was pinching. There were a couple of times in that recent session where Nadi was singing and I was weeping, crying, just uncontrollable.
Yeah.
And obviously there was a lyrical content. There was some really nerve-hitting songs, but these real emotional things start happening when you're in the privacy of it. I think Josh Homme says something about, you know, his studio in the desert. He says something about it's okay to make mistakes in the desert because no one will ever hear them. Something to that effect, you know. Yeah. And I guess he's really hit it on the head. Like, you know, if you're in a studio and you're paying for it and there's an engineer that you don't know in the corner, you know, you're going to be inhibited in some way.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to just being completely in a safe environment with people you trust.
Yep.
And you can completely let your guard down.
Yep.
And that's what you're hearing, right?
Yeah. I think that's definitely part of it. Definitely that's the essence of that's what you're hearing totally, because people are they're just expressing. They're just in the moment. They're not afraid of taking a risk, you know, just getting totally inside it without being inhibited by so many other factors.
So what do you think? Yeah. What do you think, Pete? Like, would you then say that a lot of this new music being made and expressed potentially has that? Because, I mean, I'm working with a few younger musicians now, and they've got laptops and microphones at home. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this music has that instantly in it now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I haven't actually ever really thought about how that relates to modern
music,
recording.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we are using, like, the laptop is an instrument these days. You know, people can manipulate music so quickly and so easily.
Crazy.
And they can capture audio in so many different ways, different places. Yeah, I've never really thought about that, as maybe it is closer to people's, you know, creative states. Who knows? It's a bizarre world we live in. It's great. I'm glad people are embracing it too, because I definitely don't embrace it enough. Like, I should be out there in the bush, you know, take a laptop and just record a guitar in the middle of the forest. Like, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, imagine, yeah. Well, you are out there in the bush in the middle of Tasmania, making your music.
Yeah, I just had a bunch of black cockatoos fly by, so that, you know, those sort of things are quite nice until you start doing overdubs, and then they're on every track.
Yeah.
You know. It's like the electric fence. It's okay if you're all just doing one pass, but as soon as you start doing overdubs and things like that, the noise floor gets a bit higher.
Yeah, totally. And it's if only they just screeched in time.
Yeah, that's right.
And we'd be all happy
this time. This time with feeling, guys. Come on.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Sorry, man. Yep.
No, you go. We'll move on.
So let's talk about another aspect of your being. What got you into music, Syd? I know that you're a drummer by heart, and this podcast is about guitar players, but I like to try and keep it pretty broad in terms of guitar, because guitar really is just a device. It's a tool, right? So and you play plenty of guitar, you play plenty of bass, plenty of drums. You're a recording engineer, producer, general dude.
Thanks,
what got you into the whole thing? What was the path?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess an acoustic guitar is really just a drum with strings.
Yes.
So, you know, that's the way I look at it, particularly when songwriters come in here.
Yeah.
You know, because you're playing a rhythm, and it usually is a perfect ostinato for a drum kit. So it's I love that part of the guitar for that context, you know.
Yeah.
And I think when I do play guitar, I really come at it with a rhythmic concept, you know, at the heart of it. My dad was in a cover band, so I grew up,
Sure.
my dad and his friends, my uncle as well, they'd do the weekly rehearsal in the lounge room of the greenhouse, and it would basically turn into like 5 guys smoking cigarette, and you'd just walk into this room in the 70s and it'd just be this cloud of smoke.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I don't know how we even got away with that at the time, but I do. It was just normal.
Normal, yeah. Totally.
Yeah. But I really gravitated to the drums. I would help the drummer, lug his drums out of the car and help him set it up, and then he'd give me probably a quick lesson while everyone was setting up, and
Yep.
let Syd play that song, or as a young 7 or 8 year old.
Mm-hmm.
And then on weekends I'd sort of jam with my dad. He'd play guitar and sing, and I'd just drum along. And that's where it really first started for me. I sort of dabbled in and out of it. And it was just sort of, almost like country songs, country standards is what we were doing.
Okay.
And and my first gig was his work Christmas party, and we set up and played afternoon into the evening, and then the guys passed around a hat, and I think I walked away with like $30, and I was stoked,
Yeah.
as maybe a 10 or 11-year-old, and I was just like, this is let's do more of these. And that was my trajectory that just started me, playing the drums and just loving it,
What did you do with that
Really?
$20 or $30 you made from that gig? Did you like go and buy an album or anything? Did you put it towards a kit?
I honestly don't remember what I
Bag
did
of
with
mixed
that
lollies?
$30. Probably mixed lollies, yeah. No, but I actually do remember, buying an album for my dad, but which was probably the first vinyl record, which was Willie Nelson's Stardust.
Right.
Still listen to that record. Still have it. I have it on vinyl as well, and I just think it's magical in every way. I'm sure not everyone will agree with that, but I love it. I think it's a beautiful record.
I think it really depends on when you get an album and what situation you're in at the time, and God, so many great records. Well, I think they're great because I have them from those early influential days, right? You listen to them inside out. I'm not saying that they're any better or worse than other albums that are in our collections, but I mean like those handful of albums that we have that were massive milestones. I don't know. What do you think about that sort of concept? Do you think that just because we're so influential at the time, or maybe we're a bit green, we haven't heard much yet? Or
totally. I mean, I think I remember Dad had Led Zeppelin's album 4.
Yep.
Which I think I remember getting in trouble for playing it too much.
Yeah.
Don't blow out my record. I don't even know why he was freaking out. Probably just a young kid, just too hungry to put it on the needle on the vinyl. I remember stumbling on TNT's AC/DC in his collection.
Yeah.
And I think the same week I remember him and his mates coming over, and that some of them were crying because Bon Scott had died,
Right.
And I would have been 10.
Yep.
Not understanding it, but like you say, like clearly big milestones being built because we were so open to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you have kids and I have one as well, and you can just see how how open they are when they're young, you know, just a massive sponge. And I'd imagine imagine I was the same when it was coming to music, you know, and just taking it all in without realising just how influential you would wear it on your sleeve later, you know?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's
absolutely.
Really,
I'm sort of going through that at the moment with my kids. They're just, I don't know, they go through phases of things, right? So at the moment, my son's just like drum mad. He just plays drums before school, after school.
Man, imagine having you for a dad, like, as far as guitar player. My God, he'd be in heaven, Pete.
Well, I think he is. It's hard to tell. Sometimes it's just like, you know, kids are like, they're just like, sometimes you're the most daggiest person. They don't want you around. It's like, nah, just leave me to it. I know what I'm doing. Don't tell me what to do. You know?
I was just about to say, when my son River comes in to play drums, I'll be showing him something. He's like, Dad, I know what to do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, yeah, you do
all right,
it.
Man. Yep. But that's how they learn, you know. They got to go through all that stuff, you know. If they get shown everything, that they don't have that initiative or that ear aspect, you know, it's great for them to just sit down and workshop stuff themselves. And yeah, Mac, he's doing that. He sits down there with the Bluetooth earmuffs and puts on, you know, high voltage. He plays along to that album, top to bottom. Loves it.
So good, right?
Yeah.
And particularly those early AC/DC records, I mean, they're so great to learn to. I mean, they're just fundamental as far as, you know, kick, snare. You can do it as a young kid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's pretty achievable. But
that's all we need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. You must be stoked with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. Quietly stoked. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, cool, man.
So what happened after that, Syd? So after your first drum gig, did you quickly spiral into like buying a kit, playing in school bands? Like, what's the next step for you, mate?
It's almost textbook in a way, yeah. I was doing the school band thing, always hanging out in the music room.
Yeah.
And from there, you know, and then doing the Sydney scene as a young, you know, I got my license, and next thing you know, I was doing cover bands and just doing the Sydney club, not club scene, but the pub scene, you know, where you do your 3-hour cover sets. And
sure.
That's where I gravitated to. And I was also doing a sort of original band with some mates, you know, which was almost like you know, sort of almost like metal music, you know, from when you're thinking about the late 80s. It was Metallica and Poison, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Bon Jovi.
Yep.
All those sorts of bands were quite, I mean, they were massive, you know.
Yep.
So they were pretty,
bit of hair
everyone
metal.
was doing it. Hair metal, yeah. And through that process, I started to get really hungry for original music, you know. And that's when I got the audition. I was knocking around in some bands in Sydney, and I met a photographer friend of mine who said, "Oh, there's an audition for a Melbourne band that you should go for."
Yep.
And I was like, I don't think I'm good enough, and two, they're in Melbourne, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, after thinking about it, I thought I should just do it. I should go and give it a shot. And I packed my XB 1978 Ford Falcon station wagon.
Yep.
With some drums, and
Nice.
I drove down the Hume Highway.
Yep.
Now, Pete, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a map. I was 19 years old. Never lived out of home. Like,
Yeah,
what
right.
was I thinking?
It was a pretty big adventure then, getting out of
What was I thinking?
home.
Yeah.
You had your possessions in the back of your wagon. A surfboard on the roof.
No, I wasn't surfing at that time, but I should have been. Yeah. Just crazy, and in some ways, like, I had nothing to lose, right?
That's right.
Just absolutely nothing to lose, and so I got down to Melbourne. I remember rolling up at an old phone box. Now I know I was on Clarendon Street. I somehow just followed my nose and ended up almost in the suburb I needed to be.
Hey, that's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And I stopped at a phone box. I called the person I was going to meet, and I just said, I found myself on Clarendon Street in South Melbourne. And they're like, oh, you're 4 blocks from us. So
cool.
Just go down, turn right, you're there.
Yep.
I show up for this audition, and the band was called Killing Time. I don't know if you remember them, but they had a song on Triple J that was big at the time, and I just remember thinking, I'm just gonna give it a go, you know.
Yeah.
So we just jumped into this rehearsal room, and they were like, and they loved what I was doing and what I was bringing to it, and they were like, hey, do you want to stay another day? And I'm like, sure, I'll stay another day, you know. Next thing you know, a week goes past, and I'm like, I guess I'm in the band.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, so and sure enough, I got the gig, and they're like, yeah, you're in the band, and we're going on tour with Jane's Addiction in 2 weeks.
Shit.
And my head just blew. It exploded, you know. Like, I was like, are you for real? Like, is this really happening?
Yep.
And Jane's Addiction were huge at the time.
Yeah.
And it was it was one of their final shows at the,
just around Australia.
Well. So
was this overseas or?
Oh no, it was capital cities in Australia.
Okay.
So we were the opening band. And they were great, you know. And there I was. I was 2 weeks out of Sydney, playing in cover bands, and next thing you know, I'm in the support band for Jane's Addiction, playing the Metro Theatre in Melbourne. We did the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney. Like,
yeah,
it was like, you know, a young musician's dream to land this incredible gig, right?
Yeah, and so fast, like just shot out of a rocket. Bang, here you're on stage.
Dude,
you know, like here you are.
Here we are. Here you are.
Sick.
Like,
yeah.
Like, start playing or get left behind, right?
Yep.
And it really has. They were those times now that I know were you know, they were high pressure. The band was signed to Polygram. There was a lot of money invested.
Yep.
And thankfully for me, I somehow didn't let it affect my anxiety. But obviously now with hindsight, I know I probably, if I had have really stopped to think about it, it would have been quite a lot of pressure to put on a young person.
Yes.
At the time. So yeah, off we go. We're launching off, and like I say, we're signed to Polygram. We're about to go in and make a new record with this new drummer. So they hire the producer Terry Date. So Terry Date had just recorded Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden.
Yep.
He'd recorded Pantera, Cowboys from Hell, and Vulgar Display of Power. He'd also done some Seattle bands too, like Mother Love Bone. I think he may have even done like Alice in Chains, or had something to do with.
Okay.
So, you know, he was from Seattle. He was hot at the time because obviously we're talking 1991.
Yep.
You know, Seattle was it.
Yep.
So
he was employed to
so we had
to get you guys up to that level, basically, like
up to that level.
yeah.
Up to that level, yeah. And so
Did you realise it?
there was
Did you
one
realise
student-
his enigma at the time, like his status, or were you just still that young drummer?
Oh,
who
yeah.
just, yeah, I did.
No. We knew exactly what we were getting.
Okay.
And he was very much like that. You know, he was a non-musician,
All right.
an absolute science fanatic, and an absolute wizard when it came to audio.
Okay.
And also the biggest lesson I took from him as not realizing one day that I would be doing what he was doing, which was helping people fulfill their art. And he made you feel like you were the greatest musician in that room.
That's perfect. Yeah.
And I clearly, now I know when I listen back to those records, I go, I don't even know how he put up with me, you know, like.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, he was, man, that was the art.
Yep.
The art of making everyone come together, connect, and glue a band that was coming from different angles, like you say.
Yeah.
Now, we went into John Farnham's studio at the time. It was called Gotham Audio, and
Okay.
it was in the foothills of the Dandenongs in Victoria, and it had a 7-bedroom home, and you'd walk down this little bush track to a beautifully architecturally designed mud brick, train sleepers, recycled material, state-of-the-art studio.
Sweet.
It had a 72-track SSL with two 24-track tape machines synced together.
Wow.
It was next level.
Yeah.
Like, it was all the money Whispering Jack made, basically, was in this studio. It was all time.
Yeah.
Now,
Sounds mint.
it was $3,000 a day, and we
Yep.
were there for 9 weeks.
Okay.
It was massive
Right.
budget at the time.
Yeah. Mental.
Massive budget. And that's not including Terry Date's fee, which
Yep.
was close to $100,000 or something at the time.
Yeah.
Now, if I knew what I knew now, I would have said, stop, everyone. Just stop what we're doing. We could all buy a house and make a record.
Yeah. We just do this out of my station wagon. We just record it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's all buy a house each and make a house make a record in that house. You
Yeah.
know, like anyway.
Anyway.
I didn't know what I know now, so we go in to make this record, and it's incredible. So Steve Perkins, who we just toured with the Jane's Addiction, he was going back to LA, and I was talking to him at the time. He drums in Jane's Addiction.
Sure.
And I was like, he's like, what drum kit are you going to use with Terry? And I'm like, I haven't really organised one. I'll probably just use my one. And he was like, I'll leave you my one. This
Right.
amazing DW drum kit.
Wow.
And it'll just fly back to LA when you're done. So I got to play his drum kit in this 18-foot, potentially 100 square metre drum room
Yep.
with just everything was mic'd. Terry mic'd top and bottom of all the
Really?
toms.
Wow.
There must have been 40 channels on the drums alone.
Shit. Insane.
I don't know if he actually used it all too.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
he was doing crazy reverse phase to isolate. It was
Okay.
pretty wild, right?
Sure.
I wish I knew more when we were watching him, but
Yeah.
we all sat in. We were involved in the mixing.
Yep.
We were splicing tape.
Yep.
We were editing with a cigarette. You know, there was some times when there'd be a hi-hat count or something like that, and someone would light a cigarette and then just line up the tape, burn a hole in the hi-hat track and just burn away the tape, and that would delete the hi-hat.
Wow. Right. So
Dude,
there's no like just muting the channels. It's just like, no, we'll just get rid of it.
No, it was just like, hey, we just commit to this. It was wild.
Okay.
And I guess why I'm sharing this is because we were using the medium to its ultimate ability, and I'm so glad I got to work in those environments, so I knew. When we're talking about recordings of today,
oh yeah,
they're not too far away from what we were doing, but also they were a long way away. I mean,
yes.
I knew at the time how rare that opportunity was. There wouldn't have been very many bands that, well, one could even afford it.
Yep.
So it was a really amazing apprenticeship to the start of my being fascinated in audio, and in particular recording a drum kit, which I think is still maybe one of the hardest things to get right.
Yeah, it's a constant challenge, isn't it? The phase relationship between all your microphones, how much room you want to get in there, how hard the drummer hits, how hi-fi you want it. Do you want it like lo-fi, like a nice mono mix, or do you want it nice and spread? Just tuning the drums, just the resonance. Like, there's so much involved with
there's so much.
Kit. I've never tried the double tom mic thing though. Like, have you ever tried that since? I've seen people do it, but it's like, it's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. And I think the outcome would probably be the same. You'd either end up turning it off or not using it. But I guess in the context of that style of music, maybe when there was songs where it was a lot of cymbal activity, he may have chosen to use the bottom mics because there would have been less bleed. Who knows how he was really thinking it, but I think the point was he had the channels and he had the mics and he was going to set them all up.
Totally. Yep.
I mean, I always think of those Sheryl Crow records where I think they were using 3 mics max, you know, for a drum kit, and it's probably a lot to be said for that. But again, context.
Yeah, and sometimes it is hard to do that. It takes a certain bit of control or a bit of mind power to go, all right, I could quite easily go to town with this drum kit, but I'm just going to mic up the bear, just do a Glyn Johns and be happy with it.
Yeah, right. It's almost a bit of bravery comes into it.
Yeah. Well, you need a good drummer. You need someone who's got a real nice consistency in levels between all the elements. Otherwise, it's...
That's right, because you are essentially mixing yourself. The drummer is essentially mixing themselves once you do three mics, for example. I mean, you'd really be at the mercy of that. And that would be a whole art to itself. Yeah, man.
So how long did the Killing Floor, and you guys changed your name to Mantissa as well, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
So you guys
changed
were a
our
thing
name
for a while. Like, you went overseas, made a record.
We did. So from that record, we ended up getting the Chili Peppers supports in Australia.
Yep.
And at the time, Blood Sugar had just come out, and more so Under the Bridge.
Yeah, right.
The song Under the Bridge.
Massive.
Came out, and it just blew up in front of everyone's faces. And it went from 1 gig in every capital city to 3 gigs in every capital city. So it just went for basically like over a month tour of opening for potentially the biggest band in the world at the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And again, same thing. I was just this young kid going, what the hell am I doing here? You know, like, you know, we're playing the Tennis Centre in Melbourne, like, which was probably the biggest venue at the time, you know, 15,000 people. And it was just like, this can't be happening.
Yeah.
And from there, we relocated to New York. We had a fantastic manager. The band had only signed that record deal to the Australasian market. So once we had an American producer, he went to the US part of the label and said, can we get another record advance to relocate the band? So we got that deal, and instead of making another album, we used the record advance to relocate to New York City.
Sure. Okay.
So we basically packed all our stuff up and rented a house on the same street as Eddie Murphy. Like, it's just ridiculous stories, Pete. Like even when I say it out loud, I just sound like a freaking wanker. But it was real.
Wow.
Like, it was crazy.
It's pinch yourself stuff, like, especially like looking back now. Like at the time, it might have just been part of that whole rock and roll process. Like this is all. It's all coming together, but now you're looking at, wow, how bizarre.
Yeah, how bizarre, right? And, you know, like, we were touring with lots of bands. So we had a front of house guy, a tour manager, a lighting guy.
Yep.
And we'd show up as a nobody band at say CBGB's in New York.
Yep.
With this whole crew, and everyone would be like, what the hell? What, you know, what's this band we never even heard of?
Yep.
And they're just rocking in like they got all the money, because we did, you know, it was crazy. So that was interesting. And then we'd jump on these tours. We got to tour with John Sykes. Have you heard of him?
John Sykes.
Guitar player. He was the guitar player in Thin Lizzy. And then
right, okay.
And then he played for Whitesnake.
Okay.
You know, Still of the Night. Still of the Night is a co-write with him and Coverdale.
Okay.
And he had his own band, and we were doing these sort of 2,000-seat small nightclubs in America, and we just basically did a 3-month tour with him. And he was from the UK, so we had this UK-Australian type connection. Incredible guitar player, incredible singer. But he was next level guitar player.
Okay.
And he had this like I don't know, I'm going to say maybe a 59 Black Les Paul, like a Black Beauty. Is that what they're called? Black Beauty?
The Black Beauty, yeah.
Or he called it a...
Yeah. It's pretty much a custom, like a Les Paul custom, which is,
Right. He had one of those since he was a kid,
Okay.
and he played it like lightning.
Wow.
And the last song he did in his set was Still of the Night, and he did it note for note, and probably sung it better than Coverdale, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And look, I think in that time, the band was moving in different directions, and as we were just talking about how intense it was, I think, a lot of people, a few of us were folding under the pressure.
Yep.
And it, you know, it was disintegrating without us really knowing, but
Yep.
I think that was the outcome in the end.
Yep.
But what an experience. And I would definitely say it certainly shaped my career in the context of wherever I went, I was the drummer in that band.
Sure.
And I think because of that, I hopped from that time. I just basically hopped as a session drummer into different acts.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be I ended up drumming for a guy called Iota.
Yep.
Who was sort of up and coming in the late 90s, 2000s. And then from there I was just doing different sessions and different albums.
Yep.
So it's basically set up my career that time.
Like, it's great for your business card, for your bio. Just go, all right, cool. I've experienced some big situations. I've got this, like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
it on.
It was a wild time.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. And obviously with hindsight, you'd do things differently, but then again, you wouldn't, because the lessons wouldn't have been there,
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you played a China cymbal since?
No, I haven't played a China cymbal. They're long gone, mate. They're long gone.
I remember seeing a
funny.
photo. There was a photo circulating on somewhere. Maybe Kane put it up, because Kane's pretty good at putting up photos of embarrassing. Not embarrassing.
Flashbacks.
Thursdays. Yeah, that's right. It's a massive, maybe you might have even had 3 Chinas on the kit you were mic'd up.
Yes,
playing.
Pete. That was me.
Perfect.
I had two right there.
Yep.
Just
Spinal
ridiculous.
tap. Yep.
That was the Terry Bozzio, actually, was the guy that started that.
Yep.
And boy, someone should have finished it way earlier than it took.
Oh, look, everyone has to go through that stuff. It's fun.
They
totally. Charlie Watts played bloody China cymbals his whole career as his main crash.
Oh,
Did
he really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he had a lot of big old sort of 20-inch Chinas as his main. Yeah.
As main, yeah. Well, they're quite offensive and obviously certainly pretty loud when you're talking stadium.
Yeah.
Stadium volume.
Yeah. I think Charlie's was more of a light jazz, sort of sound, as opposed to a big heavy Zildjian Z or something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
My God, they just sound like bits of corrugated iron, really.
Yeah. If I'm breaking a sheet of a pane of glass.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my short, quick bio.
Beauty. Oh, that's magic, man. That's some definite learnings right there. As a young kid, jumping into that would have been one hell of a trip. Were they all nice dudes to hang out with? Was that experience of social side of rock and roll enjoyable, or was it kind of just living the rock and roll lifestyle, or was it how did all that side of it go for you?
Yeah. Look, some of the friendships didn't end well,
okay.
And then some of them are lifetime friendships for sure.
Sure.
And one of the guys in Mantissa's actually passed away. Maybe 5 years ago from liver failure. So some of us didn't make it out unscathed, and it's pretty fortunate. Oh, you still there?
Yes, I think we're good. I
got
start
you.
Recording. Probably just hit a certain level and the internet just collapsed for a minute, I reckon. The Tasmanian internet
We've been chin wagging for at least an hour.
We have, and it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's been great so far.
What do we get up to? We just mentioned personalities and
that's right.
Camaraderie in the band as a young fella. Did you want to continue with that, or do you want to?
Yeah. So I definitely think I've got some long-lasting relationships that sort of surpass everything that you think. I think when you make music on that sort of level, there's something that goes past language. There's something that you're connecting on a level that doesn't really have words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I honestly find that I find myself in that a lot. I connect with certain humans in that way. Without sounding airy fairy, there's definitely there's something beyond what we know.
Yep. I think music's great for tapping into that because it is such a non-verbal way of expression. And if you can relate to other people musically, yeah, it's such an instant kind of brotherhood sort of connection. Or there's something, like you said, there is something deeper than words that that you can have relationships with like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I think because you, particularly if you're having those experiences, whether it's connecting by making a record or making or performing live, all those experiences that you share, you can't really talk about with someone who wasn't there or doesn't understand because it just
doesn't translate.
It just doesn't translate.
Yep.
So it's I find that really fascinating and maybe another reason why I've gone down this career path as well, where I can connect quickly with other musicians.
Yep.
On a deeper level.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. And I think that's important too, especially if you are in a studio environment and you've got different personalities in and out. You know, it's a touchy situation. A lot of the time, people are bringing you songs. Like if you're the engineer or a producer for a project, you know, people are bringing their life story to you. You know, and you have to treat it with respect, and you have to bring what you can to the song, and you have to I think being that person is more than actually being a technically advanced. You know, like having all those life skills, I think is almost more important than actually engineering a project.
I couldn't agree more, and it almost goes back to the story with Terry. You know, it's how you respect people and hold people up so they feel safe, and then you earn that trust, like you say, if they're bringing something that usually. When an artist walks in, they are usually writing from life experience, and therefore you are holding something very valuable. You know, I find that quite an honour that so many people I work with that trust me in that regard, because it's massive.
Yeah, it really is
massive.
It's the sort of stuff you can take for granted quite easily because it's just your day-to-day, you know, it comes and goes all the time, different people. But when you sit down and think about all that stuff, it's such a treasure, I think. And, people are putting a lot of trust in you. But, I'm sure that you give that back as well. So it's
absolutely. Well, I can't help that. I can't help but be invested, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the biggest things I'll say to an artist, particularly when we first met or we're working together for the first time, is I'll usually say, right now is the clearest I'll ever be, because by the end of the day I'll be as deep and invested and as lost as you are.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's just how I roll. And so usually my first instincts are, we'll usually write them down, you know. Oh, what did you say early this morning before you love the song as much as I do? Do you know what I mean? Or so it's and I recognise that in myself. So I'll usually, you know, if someone sends me a demo, I'll write down my first thoughts and intuitions before I start investing, and therefore can't see it as clear as I could when I was standing on the outside. You know?
Totally. Yep, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool to be able to recognise that. I think too. You know.
Yeah, and to also just give into it as well. Go, all right, cool. Let's all make this music together. Let's all be part of the same machine.
Let's get lost.
Yeah, let's get lost. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get lost. Chet Baker. Love that record. I love that record.
What are some of
yeah.
your influential artists and records? And I suppose you're coming from many different angles. You'd sort of come as a drummer listening to music, but you'd also listen to it as a producer, as guitar players.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of your key albums you think that shape who you are?
Jeez, I think I always find that really hard to answer because
Yes.
of I feel like I've had 9 lives in a way, where I've been, my career has been shape shifting. Well, one maybe based on the environment, but also as you get older, your tastes change, and the palate can handle more savoury
Yes.
things,
Yeah. Yeah.
But we talked about early AC/DC and Zeppelin
Stardust.
and Stardust, and one of your questions that we were talking about when we were chatting last week was maybe it was like favourite guitar solo, and one that comes to mind is Lowell George.
Oh yeah. Right.
I absolutely love Little Feat, and in some ways, isn't it interesting? Like Little Feat almost is everything I just said, because they are so broad, and had lots of influences, and then it was like this huge, like a paella or something. It was just all these foods all stuck together, and
Yeah.
But I just love his tone, vocally and guitar tone. I find it pretty hard to get past that one.
Yeah. That's
every time.
That's
Every time I hear it.
Totally understandable. Yeah, it's so easy to get lost in his approach to playing, like performing, singing, and playing his guitar. And
Yeah.
it never seemed in a hurry. He always, to me, just sounded like he was totally cool with it to get there in 10 minutes time, or maybe more instant than that. But he was always just like, this is, I don't know. Just his approach seemed so relaxed and so comfortable.
Yeah. I mean, have you read the Ricky Lee Jones biography?
No.
She released a book maybe, I think it was during COVID, so 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But her book is fabulous because one, she talks about the songs in that first record of hers, and the chapters will be running through, and then all of a sudden it'll be, and this is how this song came out, like Texaco and Chucky's in Love.
Yep.
And then there's a song called Weasel and the White Boy on her first record. I think it's Jeff Beccaro playing drums. But Lowell George ended up covering that song in a Little Feat record.
Ah, sure.
And they actually ended up going out together, and
Yep.
it's interesting her perspective and talking about him in that context, which was really beautiful to hear, and just that very thing that you were saying, he was so at ease
Yeah.
with songwriting, and clearly he was, like we were just talking about, channeling a real in the moment approach.
Yes.
That clearly you could see every time. I mean, any footage or even the records that you're listening to.
Yep.
Those Little Feat records, he's just so in it.
So in it. It's interesting.
So in it.
I was listening to a Bonnie Raitt album, Taking My Time, which is from 1973. And I was like, I'm sure I could hear Lowell George in there. Like, it just sounded like, because I knew that there was a relationship there. I know that Bonnie and
right.
I think Emmy Lou sung backups on Dixie Chicken record, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And Lowell, actually, I looked at the wiki, and it turns out Lowell was meant to be producing that album, of the Bonnie Raitt album, Taking My Time, which they started doing, and for some reason he got the sack or he didn't follow through on it. I don't know where that came from.
Being a naughty boy.
I don't know. I just don't think he bought what they were expecting. I don't know. It's quite odd. But he's on a track.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, he's on a track.
So it is actually him playing.
He's on the track. Yeah, totally. I'm
wow.
just trying to think which song it is. I should actually find out so the listeners can find out.
Because Ry Cooder's actually playing the slide on Dixie Chicken, isn't he? Or
I don't know. Is he?
no, maybe not Dixie Chicken. There's another. Is it Fat Man in the Bathtub? It's actually Ry Cooder.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah. Because there was this whole thing where I kept hearing that, thinking, man, that sounds like Ry Cooder, but you're just thinking it's Lowell George. But it actually turned out maybe it's 2 Trains or. Let's find out. We'll find out. Put it in the show notes.
Yeah, the show notes. Yeah, make it clear.
Yeah, show notes. Is there show notes, Pete?
Yeah, we can have show notes. Yeah.
Actually, the only show notes will be a photo of me with blonde perm hair and 2 China symbols.
That's the perfect image. Totally.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's all you need for show notes.
And speaking of sliding guitars, like guitars with metal bars and things, you've been fooling around on a pedal steel, I believe.
Oh my goodness!
Tell me about that journey.
Pete, have you played the pedal steel?
I have indeed. I've had one in my possession for maybe 10 years, maybe a little longer.
So you'll understand.
I understand your pain. Yes, it's such a wild.
My pain.
Far out. Yeah. So tell me about your journey. Yeah.
Okay, so a dear friend of mine, Marcus Adamson, well, I was recording his band, and he said, "Hey, I've got this Showbud pedal steel at home. I don't play it. I reckon you would play it if you had it. You should come around and get it one day." Sure enough, next day I called him. "Hey, Marcus, if you're serious about that, if you're serious, I'm coming over right now to get it." And he's like, "Come and get it." So, and then, as you know, next minute, like, I'm delving down every YouTube rabbit hole on how to play this thing.
Yeah.
And, I've loved the slide, the dobro, and the slide guitar as well. I've loved that for 20 years or more. Got to do some great dobro master classes with a guy called Michael Whitaker, who's a great bluegrass US player. Mm-hmm. He'd learnt a little bit under Jerry Douglas as well.
Great.
So I basically, all my licks are his, when it comes to the dobro. But the pedal steel, oh my God, it's just going down the rabbit hole of the guy that actually invented it is clearly a genius and a mental case.
Yes. Yes.
Just even how it works.
Just the physicality of it, totally.
Yeah.
Levers and rods and pedals
I don't know if you've stumbled on this, but the guy that invented it was a auto spare parts guy, and he was used. So all the pedals are little clutches of tractors. The first one that he made was the actual clutch pedals.
Right.
It's just like, this is crazy, And then the tuning, is absolutely fascinating, and yet starts to make sense once you sort of decode it.
Yes.
Which is why I mean it's genius, because it's just so clever.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I've delved into it. I wouldn't say I'm a pedal steel player, but the way I'm using it for texture and undercurrents is I think an incredible tool, because it's almost like a keyboard, a synth and a guitar.
Yeah.
And something out of this world.
Yeah.
And an organ. Yeah.
All those chordal kind of droney, spatial. Yeah, we've talked about this before, like having like Lanoir as a guy that we're all into. Like to hear and see him on steel that's an inspiration as well.
Yeah.
Like the way that he approaches it.
Isn't it?
He doesn't really approach it at all like a traditional instrument. He just, puts the volume down and puts some delay and reverb on and just touches it so lightly. Yeah,
it's incredible, isn't it? And he's really sort of using it as a way of reacting, as opposed to like other instruments where you sort of lead on them.
Yeah.
This thing, he's just sort of reacting and impulsing in a real subconscious type level.
Yeah, totally.
Which I find that instrument amazing to do with,
Yep.
And just in the small time I've had it, but I find it so beautiful and just takes me away instantly,
Yep. Oh, it's easy to spend a few hours on it, and it's almost like you've just done yoga for a few hours. You just sort of come out of this like state. It's like, I feel so
totally
so dreamy.
Right. Yeah. There's a Bon Iver record, a self-titled record, which has pedal steel all over it, and it's like you were just saying. It's played in a very unorthodox way of playing pedal steel.
Right.
It's certainly a cross between a keyboard and a sort of almost like a harp or something. Okay. It's I don't know if you've checked it out, but it's probably one of my favourite records in the sense of it was one of the first records I had to listen to from start to finish, in the context of having such a big gap. Like when you're young, you have time to listen to records start to finish. And then there was a time when you just became so busy that you didn't have the time for that.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden that Bon Iver record was like, oh, I'm gonna run a bath and listen to that record for the next 50 minutes, start to finish.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And it is just a journey. It's just such a beautiful journey, and sonically, it's such a masterpiece of art.
Well, that sounds like, I better go and run the bath. That sounds great. What's it called, man? What's the record called? Do you know?
It's self-titled.
It's
Bon Iver.
Okay, yeah.
Bon Iver, yeah. It's after Emma Forever. The one where he sort of shacked up in a log cabin and recorded most of it himself.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So, and then from the back of that record, it's quite fascinating if you have a look at the backstory. Him and his brother recorded and produced it. I've read some stories about they ended up buying an old indoor pool and emptied it out, and so the reverbs you're hearing are actually an empty Olympic pool.
Okay. Yeah.
It is insane.
Oh, that's bizarre. Okay.
It's amazing record.
Yeah, that sounds like a trip. Cool.
And, and all the instruments are organic.
Yeah.
Like his first record was very, he used his voice, for choral effects, where at this record he had the budget to clearly use an orchestra or a horn section or the greatest pedal steel player that was going at the time.
Right.
And, I think you'd really like it, Pete.
Nice.
I'm selling it to you.
Yeah,
I'm selling
done.
it to you.
All right, let's finish this chat. I'm going to go for bath. So what's coming up for you, Syd? What's in the pipelines, man? You got lots of projects on the go, got some gigs. You still touring a bit with Kasey and all that?
Yeah, I go to as we were planning on chatting tomorrow, but I go to Mount Isa tomorrow with Kasey. Okay. We're doing a festival up there.
Yep. Off to Gympie this year?
We're not doing Gympie this year.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got gigs peppered with Kasey throughout the year. I think we're doing Queenscliff Folk Festival. She's doing some of her own shows, and then she's scheduled to do a really big tour next year for her new album and her book as well.
Okay, sure.
So we've got next year really almost planned and mapped out, which is amazing as a self-employed musician to have that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, safety net of... financial...
It's a dream.
Yeah.
It's a dream to have that, have that sort of all planned, and it's amazing. What a band to play in.
I'd be a hoot.
Honestly.
I talked to Jeb Cardwell last week. So he's going to be on the show.
Oh, Jebby.
Yeah.
We love Jebby.
We love Jebby.
Yeah.
So, so we'll talk a little bit about the machine that it is and how much he enjoys getting on board when he can.
Oh, man, it's beautiful. They were always about to say, we love having Jeb on board, mainly because, I've been with Case since COVID, and it's, how we're talking about connection, and when you finally find yourself in a place where you're connecting with people that you feel like you've known your whole life, like-mindedness, we all like the same things. We all like similar music and what it does and what it means. Yet we're all different. It's it's pretty beautiful. I pinch myself daily to be able to play, and obviously it makes you a better musician too.
Oh, 100%.
Just because you care, you care about how you hold yourself as a musician and what you bring to it, Well, that's certainly the way I think of it.
Well, if that's the way that they make you feel too, that's good, because I'm sure they could find someone else in a heartbeat to I wouldn't say fill your shoes, but I can say play drums in that environment. They could find so.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure it works for
for
both sides of the camp. Like if you're feeling wanted and respected, I'm sure that it comes both ways. So that's important.
It comes both ways. Yeah, and so it's such a incredible band to be playing with and alongside. It's quite incredible. We've got Blues Fest next year as well, and a couple of those, the Big Red Bashes, and there's a few big gigs, but as you know, I've been playing big gigs all my life from the stories now.
It's only 5,000 seaters and above, thanks. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And my own rider, I own the dressing room, limousines.
Actually, because I'm a plant-based eater, and Kasey will go to the trouble of, even on the rider there'll be, cheese and bickies and stuff, and then there'll be a little box and it says for Syd vegan, and so I actually get really looked after, and so it's quite beautiful.
Sounds like a dream. Like you said, it's like a pretty fun way to get around, play music with some good people, especially
man, can
if
you
get
believe
to those
it?
remote places. Like that's where music I think is great in Australia. Is it's an excuse to go to these beautiful remote places that you never get a chance to go to otherwise. So that stuff's pretty special too.
Oh man, it really is. Yeah. And we did a lot of that with 1920 as well. With Kane, and we'd find ourselves in some of the weirdest remote little festivals, particularly some that come to mind, like North Queensland, in the lava tubes.
Oh yeah.
And the Daintree. There was a lot of times touring with 1920, and we were just like, how did we get here? And Kasey as well. Some pretty pretty sort of special gigs in that way, you know, because it's just, you just can't afford to get a whole band out to some of these remote places, you know, like it's clearly just too expensive. So, really fortunate. Yeah.
That's right. All right, Syd. Well, I better let you get your go and pack your bags. You've got a bit of an adventure in front of you. So
cool,
thanks
mate.
very much for letting us
man.
inside your world for an hour and a bit. We had a good...
Yeah, you're going to have to edit this one down, mate. You're going to have to edit
this is long
heaps
form
of it
entertainment.
out.
This is, you know, people are driving hours on a bus or in a train. This is perfect for
they'll
those
just
long
sit
journeys.
back and
or before they go to sleep, you know.
yeah. Hey Pete, I want to say I just love your music. I love watching you making music, and it's a real honour for you to ask me to be on your show, mate. I really dig what you do.
Appreciate that, Syd. That means a lot, mate. So I always enjoy hanging out with you and making music as well. So yeah, it's a mutual thing here, brother.
Yeah, we should do that. Actually, we've got some shows in Tassie. I'll let you know.
Yeah, hook us up. We'll hang out.
Yeah,
I don't have any wetsuits your size, but if you know, I'm sure.
Damn it! I'll bring one.
Yeah, bring a wedding. We'll go and hang out in the ocean for a while. That's.
I think I'm in Devonport. Is it Devonport?
Devonport.
Devon. Yeah. In March, I think we're doing a theatre there.
Okay. Yeah, there's a beautiful theatre there, the Paranapple.
Yeah.
I think it's called.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, come to that gig.
All right, done.
You should actually, while you're there, you should do a podcast with Brandon or Bill or both.
That would be a treat. Put them both on a mic.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hook me up, brother. We'll make it a thing.
Okay. Well, easy. Yeah, easy. That's done. You'll love Bill. Bill's great.
Yeah, I hung out briefly with Bill at Tamworth when he does his hosts those gigs at the pub.
Oh,
I got up on stage with him once.
Yeah.
Played a few tunes.
Oh, fantastic.
Fun.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really fun, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think, we're doing that again this year too. Oh, well, next Tamworth, I mean.
Sure.
Next year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Beauty.
Cool, mate.
All right, Syd.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks very much, man.
All right, mate.
Catch you, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. See you, man.
Thanks for listening, folks, to another episode of Say It With Guitars. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it around to your mates, leave a good review, and hopefully we'll see you next time.